This Talking Flutes podcast is kindly sponsored by Trevor James Flutes, making life sound beautiful. You can show them some flute love by following them on Instagram at TJ Flutes, Trevor James Flutes on Facebook, and at trevorjamesflutes.com.
Hello and welcome to Talking Flutes. Today is all about teaching and learning. Now I think as a teacher we can often forget what it's like to be a student and learning new skills for the first time. It can be very enlightening to swap places and become the student again. I'm always interested in how other teachers teach, no matter what the specialism is. Now as many of you know, I ran my own flute summer course for over 25 years. A few weeks ago, I went on a course not for flute but for golf. Now for regular listeners, this will come as no surprise as I'm often referencing golf. I found the whole experience fascinating, to be on the receiving end of tuition rather than the giving. It made me think about how I learn and how I respond to tuition. Now there are many parallels between learning the flute and learning golf. Not surprising as there are so many similarities in learning a practical skill. So today I'm thrilled to be chatting to Ryan Fenwick, the head PGA professional at West Hove Golf Club here in the UK. Hello Ryan.
Hello Claire, thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm so excited about this, Ryan. This is right up my tree. Now I'm going to run through some of your career highlights,
Okay.
just so people understand. Now you're the head PGA professional at West Hove Golf Club and you're the owner of the Ryan Fenwick Golf Academy. And you're a former tour professional and you competed all over the world, winning in lots of places, including South Africa. Former England coach for 12 years, former head Sussex coach, and you opened up your Ryan Fenwick. You opened up your Ryan Fenwick Golf Academy to help various levels of players, but you spend most of your time coaching at elite level. However, you still enjoy coaching all levels of players who have a desire to learn and improve. That's where I fit in.
Absolutely.
Many parallels in teaching. So, how would you describe your teaching style?
That's a great question, Claire. So I've been asked that a few times. When I think about it, it definitely comes from my experience of my playing days and being around great coaches. I was very fortunate enough to spend a lot of time with some world-class coaches, and one of them being the great David Ledbetter in Florida. David and his wife Kelly took me under their wing many moons ago, and I spent sort of 3 years in the winter months training under David and watching him coach the greatest players in the world, your Greg Normans, your Nick Faldos, your Tom Watsons. And I think from those days in my playing experience, my coaching style now is very rounded in the regards that relationships are everything, communication is everything, and honesty is everything. And I'm a big advocate of what environment we create as coaches for our players, because environment will dictate what the habits and the routines are of the player. So we're looking at everything, but really it's about relationships for me and that honesty.
Wow, very similar to music. So relationships are all important, because if you don't have that relationship with your student, it's very difficult for them to learn. They need to know that you're being straight with them and that they can trust what you're saying to them.
It's so important. I come across many adolescents, young players who then grow into becoming 18, 19, 20 years old, leaving the UK, getting scholarships in America, returning to the UK, wanting to become professionals. And relationships is massive. And a little story, I attended a wedding this weekend of one of the young lads I've been involved with since he's 12 years old, and his mum and dad, and his girlfriend as well. And he's actually a golf professional who's playing in the Open Championship this week, Marco Penge. So it'd be good to watch out for Marco. Why am I talking about that? Well, he's 25 now. I started being part of Marco's team when he was 12 years old. And he lives in Manchester now, so I no longer coach him, but I'm still friends, and we still have that great bond and great relationship, even though I'm not his everyday coach. So being part of someone's life is really important as a coach, because you get to know them as well as the people closest to them.
It's interesting that professional golfers have coaches. Yeah, in music it tends to be that the professional players, so the professional flute players, don't have coaches. They've moved on. I've often thought that it would be great if you could still keep a connection. Happens in singing a lot more, but not in flute. So you finish your training and then you launch off into the professional life on your own.
Wow.
And that's really difficult, because when you're on your own, you lose that big support of your coach, and you have to work things out for yourself, and it's not an easy path.
Why is that? Is there a reason?
I don't know. It's just how it's always been. And I suppose there's so little money in professional music that you can't really afford to have a coach sort of on tap all the time. Not that in the lower levels of golf you're earning very much money either.
No.
But it seems to be, I mean, the top players, don't they? They have their manager, they have their training instructor, they have their physiotherapist, they've got the lot.
They certainly have. There's an entourage that are travelling with most of the top players these days. And you could see that across a multitude of sports. But in my industry in golf, you'll see it this week on the TV for the Open Championship at Royal Liverpool. They'll have their golf coach, they'll have their putting coach, they'll have a short game coach, they'll have a sports psychologist, they'll have a massage therapist, they'll have their physio or strength and conditioning coach with them, their agent, their caddy, and then they'll have their family as well.
Right, well, flute players, maybe we should...
you should step up.
Step up. We need to have our tone coach, our technique coach, our articulation coach, the manager, of course, makeup and hair artist, which some people do, I know, performance coach, advisors.
That's it.
Yes.
But then we were talking about players on a slightly lower level who are professionals, that I do coach and do support, who don't earn the money to be able to afford somebody like me to travel to tournaments all the time. However, I do think it's part of our job and our remit to invest time, energy, effort with these players so that they do become autonomous, like you're describing the flute players, so they are as self-sufficient as they can be. Even though the top golfers in the world are self-sufficient, they still need that environment around them every week of high performance. So motivation isn't a problem for those guys and girls, but making sure they are doing all the right stuff, right down to what they eat, what they drink, how much sleep they get, are they flexible enough, are they fit enough, and is their mind ready to compete. So by having all of that team with them, that's what makes them tick.
It's still so applicable to flute, because you also need to eat well, sleep well, be fit, because we're basically, most of us, self-employed. So if you're ill, you don't get paid. So it's really important that we look after every aspect of our lifestyle, and yet it's not common in the music world, and it really should be. Maybe I should set myself up as a life coach. Ryan.
Sounds great. I'll employ you tomorrow.
Oh,
Claire.
great. Wonderful.
You're amazing.
Wonderful. Okay, that's really interesting stuff, this. When you were playing, did you also teach?
In my early days of being a professional, the answer would be no. As I grew as a professional, became older, more mature, more experienced, I then realised actually I had knowledge that I could give to other people. So you might start with friends, family, and then you play a lot of pro-ams. So you meet a lot of corporate clients who love their golf, who would give anything to be able to do what we can do, who can afford coaching and things like that. But in the pro-ams you would end up giving advice, coaching, without realising that you're coaching. And it wasn't until I stopped playing golf I already had an experience of coaching via those avenues, which really helped me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I started teaching, my first student was when I was at school, in the sixth form, and there was a a youngster who wanted to have some lessons. So I stepped in. And then from college days, I'd always had a few private students. And I developed a love for it because it complemented the playing aspect. You can't just become a teacher. You have to sort of develop your own ideas and ways of communicating. That comes after many, many years. But for me, it was always the two things were going on side by side. And I always knew that if you should only teach if you wanted to. And a lot of musicians teach because they have to.
Yeah.
Which is not always a good place to start.
Do you find that comes across? Can you almost tell the ones that do it because they love it?
I think so, with the enthusiasm and the fact that, I always say that the role of a teacher is to be dispensable in terms of when you've given all that you can give and they can stand on their own 2 feet, then you're of no use anymore. Different in golf, because then you're still needed for that as a sounding board and to check things out. And I just feel that we should bring that definitely more into the music industry.
You should, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Mentorship, things like that.
Yeah.
Like you say, sounding board's really, really important. I spend a lot of my time talking to not just the player, but because there's so many people involved in their team. So it might be the physio, it might be the swing coach, it might be the putting coach. But I spend a hell of a lot of my time talking to the caddy, because the caddy, it's like a marriage. So the caddy will be with that player 10 hours a day. They're spending maybe 2 hours warming up, 4.5 hours, 5 hours on the golf course. They'll come in, they'll sign their card, they'll do their stats, fill out their statistics for the day, have something to eat, then they'll start practicing again. And the caddy is with them all the time. So it is a marriage, and you get some interesting insights by asking some probing questions, as well as asking the player, but you'll get two sides of the story.
For those of you who don't know anything about golf, professional golfers have a partner called the caddy who carries their clubs and gives them the yardages for each shot. So you've got someone to check with and discuss about which shot you're going to do. So it's a bit like if you're a flute player and you're standing on the concert stage and you've got your teacher there and you say, and how do you think I should approach this piece, and what pointers could you give me? Except we don't have that.
Interesting. A caddy is, they're almost a golfologist. So they have to have an element of psychology, great knowledge of the game, great knowledge of the player, real deep insights in how they respond to failure, what makes them tick, what gets them aroused, are they over aroused, what's the body language, what signs are they showing off. And the caddy will be controlling the whole routine over each shot. Quite often on TV we'll watch a golfer about to play their shot, and just before they're about to swing they'll step away. Quite often that's the caddy stepping in and just quietly saying to the player, stop, we need to press reset, the wind might have changed, something might happen, or the player just looks uncomfortable and distracted. But the player is so emotionally attached in that moment, they're not aware of it. So they have the luxury of the caddy stepping in and saying, come on, let's start again.
Oh, it's interesting, isn't it? So, I started off our chat today saying that I'd been on one of your courses, which was incredible. And we had 4 days of quite intense coaching, which really appealed to the way I like to learn, that where things are very clear and concise, and you have a clear route as to what you should be doing and how you can achieve your goal. So you're on a journey from A to B, and you start at A and you're given clear directions how to start moving forward, even though it might take you a long time to get to B. So how do you think someone can become a good student?
Wow, what a question. Open, have a willingness to fail is the first thing I'll always say to everybody, where a lot of people really don't understand that, because golf has so many variables, like many sports, weather, wind, every shot's different length shot. There's so much to learn. So a willingness to learn, a willingness to fail and an understanding that frustration is a big part of the process.
Same in music. To get further in music, we have auditions or exams. So it might be an exam or an audition to get in a particular group or to get into a college or to get into an orchestra. And there's far more failure than there is success, because very few people make that next step up. So I think you're absolutely right. Learning how to deal with failure, how to overcome that disappointment, that frustration. I used to find that whenever I had a sort of rejection, whatever it might be, I would have a day of, kicking the cupboard and feeling really upset and cross about it. And then the next day I say, right, what's the next thing I'm going for? And I did tons of competitions, and I'd be on to the next one. The preparation was what was important, that you always gave yourself time for that preparation. Maybe we should move on to that about competitions. Where do competitions fit in terms of music and sport?
With music, how do you reflect on a performance, or if you were at a competition and you have judges at competitions, I believe?
Yep.
So the result is in somebody else's hand.
Mm-hmm.
So you may feel like you've played the perfect piece, done everything exactly how you would do it, and not win. Mm-hmm. And then other times you may be feeling you haven't achieved what you wanted to achieve, but maybe you've won. How do you reflect on both of those?
It's very, very, very difficult, because sometimes if you feel you've played the best you can and you get rejected, it's very difficult to be able to step back and deal with it. We were saying earlier, we were chatting before we started the recording, that music is very subjective, whereas in golf you go round in the person who gets round in the least shots wins. Whereas in music it's not that clear cut. You're dependent on an external panel, whether they like you, whether they like what you're doing, whether you've communicated to them, and it makes it very, very difficult. But yeah, looking back at being able to give yourself a little bit of time after rejection to just sort of recover from the shock, and then to reflect after a day or two and try and think about how you can improve, because we don't get feedback.
Oh, really?
Don't get feedback. So you haven't got through to the next round, or you haven't got in the orchestra, or you didn't pass. Exams you will do if it's the accredited exam boards.
And you haven't got a coaching team with you to help you reflect? No,
unless it's been with an audience where you might have people who know you, who can give you feedback after you've performed. But generally speaking, you've got to work it out for yourself. Wow. And often you don't come to the right conclusion.
Yes.
So it is very, very difficult. So you just have to say, well, I did what I prepared enough, I played well, for me, I did the best I could do. It wasn't good enough, I don't know why, but I did as best I could do. And then hopefully the next time you do the same preparation, the same mentality of going in all prepared, ready, give a great show, and then hopefully you do get through.
Fantastic. I love that. The difference in golf is the golfers have a team that help them reflect. So they have a score, which doesn't normally lie. They'll have a set of statistics.
I love statistics.
I'm very big into that because it's factual. It's not the be all and end all, and there are factors that will influence that, weather and injury or something. But our reflections are pretty uncomfortable at the high level when you're talking to somebody who's in high performance, whether it's a top amateur or a professional. The reflections can be quite tricky, and they are supposed to be uncomfortable because you want to get into somebody's head, into their psyche and their thinking, but mainly their honesty. Because if they're not being honest, they're hiding from something, and they'll never kick on. The best players I've played with, who are very well known around the world, they are 100% the most honest people you will meet about themselves and the people around them.
Yeah. I suppose the only thing that's, I could say, is vaguely similar to that is that we can record ourselves. And so you can listen back to recordings and you can play recordings to your tutors.
Right.
And then you can assess how things were. But unless you've got the most fantastic recording equipment, it's very difficult to be precise about how someone has sounded. It's very much more how they've phrased something, how if they've played with the clarity of articulation. You look at individual aspects, but the actual tone bit is difficult unless you've got a few £1,000s spent on a microphone.
Yes.
And of course you have a video and machines that tell people how far they've hit and what's happening to the actual golf ball when they hit. We don't have any of this technology. We just have recordings.
Yeah. And you and your feelings, your emotions, your reflections can be challenging if you're the only person because you're emotionally attached.
Very emotionally attached. That's the same with both of our specialities. Your emotions are intertwined with everything you do. And so it's very difficult to pick someone up when they've had a disappointment. And also it's quite hard to calm someone down when they've had a great success because they have to go on to the next stage and be calm about it all.
Yeah, press reset, let's go again.
Yes.
Yeah. Use that as a fuel, a confidence booster, but not as a distraction, and never get complacent. That is so easy to happen. I've had that with young people and their parents where they're winning at under 14s, under 15s, under 16s and so on, and they come to wanting to turn professional in their, say, 20 years old, but they've stopped growing because everyone else has been working really hard around them and they start to overtake them. And a lot of these youngsters haven't had much adversity in their life. When they turn professional, it becomes so much more expensive, so much more cutthroat out there, and you need to be really hard. And a lot of them, when they're young, are scared of failing because they're used to winning, so they don't know what it feels like. So they have no coping skills as they get older. Whereas a lot of the younger ones who have failed but were still competitive are used to adversity, know how to deal with it, and they generally kick on. So I don't know in the music world if you have a lot of young people who are very well known, very, very good at what they do, but they plateau out and stop moving forward. Happens
all the time. We have in the UK, we have exams that you can do, sort of public exams run by people like the Associated Board and Trinity, and they have different levels. And we have a lot of players who've taken the top level at an early age because they can move around the instrument very easily and play all the pieces. So they think because they've achieved this top level of the exam that they've sort of made it, and then they come and audition at music college and they don't get in anywhere because they're nowhere near the level that's required because they've been so focused on getting their exams done they've forgotten to actually learn how to play the thing. And they've not taken advice and they've not opened their ears to the level that is around them, and so they don't have any idea, they don't understand why they're not the best player around. In fact, no, they're nowhere near the best player. So I think it's a good lesson for us all to learn to listen and to watch what's going on around you so that you're aware of what the level is and go and watch and listen and learn. So in music we say go to flute courses, hear classes given at the conservatoires, and watch and listen, and so you're aware of what the level is.
I think that's fantastic. Sorry to cut in there. I feel that's amazing. Skill acquisition. So learning new skills and then implementing them skills is so important. The creativity, the visualization to want to improve is everything. It's got to be driven within you. I'll give you a short little story about my own son. So I've got 3 children. He's our middle child. I actually did it with my eldest child as well, but a very good friend of mine used to run the Australian Institute of Sport, heavily into human movement, and I just knew my children were going to be into sport. And he said to me, don't let your son walk too early, keep him crawling up the stairs. And I was fascinated by this. And he said also, when you get him in the garden and he's playing with balls, make sure he's throwing with his right hand and his left hand, and he's kicking with his right foot and his left foot. He's 12 years old now. He's in the Brighton Football Academy, and he uses both feet. But from the age of 4 in the garden, we encouraged him to use his left foot, not his right foot. So we used to do little games. He's right-footed, he's right-handed. And when he arrived at the Brighton Academy and the coach said, what foot are you? He said, I'm left-footed. And he's not. He's actually right-footed, but he can use both feet. And that was purely the environment that he grew up in our back garden from a very young age. So I experimented there to see what would happen. And I think it's great that if parents and people themselves, no matter what age they are, do something different and have the courage to do something different rather than just doing the same as what everybody else does, because that may not be applicable to your own personal learning journey or your own DNA. Everybody is different, and especially in golf, everybody's arm lengths are different, their height is different, their torso versus their leg length is different. They may play golf right-handed, but they might actually be left-handed, so they're left side dominant. They may have a right eye dominance or a left eye dominance. Everybody's a unique individual, but be creative and keep developing that skill set so that when you're in the highest environment and under the most pressure, you've got so much armour in your locker.
Yeah, very good words. I used to find that I was a bit rebellious if I heard someone say, don't do X. I would do X to just see why it didn't work.
Love it.
So you become a bit more flexible, but you're not afraid to go somewhere to try and help your learning experience. I said I came on your coaching trip in lovely sunny Portugal, and I very much on a very happy golfing journey, and very frustrating actually, I have to say, incredibly frustrating. The most frustrating thing I've ever done, and the most joyful thing I've ever done in terms of hobbies. But I watch a lot of golf and teaching videos, and I often hear things and I go and try them, think one day either it's, oh, that works really well, and then the next day I try it, I think that doesn't work at all. And it messes with my head, which is where having a really good coach is important, that you don't go off on a complete tangent which wrecks everything that you've been doing. And that's what happens in flute. Sometimes that you've been learning something, you've changed something, getting into a bad habit is so easy, and getting into a good habit is so hard.
Yes, agreed. In golfing terms, to create a bad habit, they say will happen in 500 shots. To get out of that bad habit, they say it takes 5,000 shots.
Oh dear. Now let's move on to some other things. We've had a similar experience in our professional lives, in that we both had to give up playing because of ill health.
Yes.
And you've managed to build a hugely successful career after playing. I wanted to know how difficult that was. Can you talk about resilience and mental strength, and how did you set a new path, and how did you set new life goals?
It's only until recently, Claire, I've realised what I actually did to cope with the stresses of giving up playing as a tournament professional, travelling the world with the same people, being in the environment I'd always wanted to be in since a young kid. As a young kid, I used to train before school, after school. It still is my life, but it really was my life as a player. When I stopped playing, I literally stopped playing on the Friday, and 2 weeks later, I'd started my coaching badges, because I just threw myself into it because I didn't know anything else. Nothing else entered my head. It was just an obvious thing that I wanted to do. I just loved the environment. I love being around people, and I then realised I had a bit of a knack for it. I think my personality is that way, and helping people is something I enjoy doing. I was still slightly competitive in the early days of my coaching, and then my health got too bad. I had to give up, and I now haven't played or been competitive for at least 10 years. So being around very good players, being around complete beginners, being around the average club golfer, all gives me happiness and joy, because I'm helping someone and seeing them get better at what they love. And that's what I used to do. I can't do it myself, so the next best thing is seeing other people do it.
Yeah, that's lovely. And I always used to say that I'll teach all ages, all abilities if they want to learn. It's whether if someone wants to learn something, I can help.
Yeah.
And it's great satisfaction when you do that.
It's amazing. We have many young children in our academy, start from the age of 5, go right through to 18. We've got a couple of them at the moment. There's a young lad who's 7 years old, he's just turned 7, young Alex, comes with his dad every week, and there's a group of children that come, and even at 7 he's already competitive. So he's playing around the country, and he's already played a tournament in Europe. Why am I mentioning this? Well, this young lad just bounces off the walls when he walks in, and he doesn't even recognise when he's hit a bad shot. All he talks about is his good shots. The older juniors, so you'll get a 16, 17-year-old, all they're talking about is their bad shots. So you've got parallels there in the regard that they're both wanting to achieve something, but actually their reflection's quite different. And when you see these little ones coming in the academy and loving their golf, I get such a buzz from being around that and helping them, not just with their golf, but little things. So we do things about discipline and habits and routine. So young Alex will have to arrive and we'll ask the parents, did he make his bed this morning? Did he clean his shoes? If the answer's no, they're not allowed to attend the session.
That's tough.
We make that really clear before they sign up. There's just little things that we do, little life skills, to give them ownership from day one. Because our job isn't just to tell, our job is to coach. And the definition of a coach is taking someone from one destination and delivering them to another destination. But you're not going to be there all the time. So ideally we want to make ourselves redundant.
Yeah.
So giving them the skills as much as we can is really, really important. If they learn that early, they generally will carry that on.
That's great. I wonder if any of our flute teachers listening will implement when they have a student, have you made your bed today? Have you cleaned your shoes? Did you clean your flute out? And that's before you've even talked about practice.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, that's incredible.
There are so many little things and habits and behaviours that the world's best players do that we don't really know about. I'm fortunate enough to know about these things, and it's important that people like me pass that on, because if we don't pass it on, how are they ever going to know?
Yeah, and I'm the same in that I know how the professional flute player works, the successful ones, how they approach their work, how their work ethic, their practice, the way they apply themselves, and the way they keep themselves motivated, a similar thing. But let's move on. You've talked about these youngsters and teenagers. What about the old buggers like me? How do you approach the people who are just true amateurs, who just love the sport or the discipline and want to learn? Do you do different things? You haven't asked me if I've made my bed.
Well, I would hope you would, Claire.
I have, don't worry.
I know how disciplined you are, absolutely. I know how polished your shoes always are. No, I'm only kidding. It's very different, you know, someone who's a parent or full-time job and running the house and everything they've got going on. So golf to them is their outlet, it's their release, it's their hobby, their love, their passion. They get so much enjoyment. Sometimes coaches like myself can actually take that enjoyment away by trying to make somebody perfect. So the first thing is to get them to understand the standard they are and be realistic about where they want to get to. And then we build a plan around, well, how are we going to get there? I use a traffic light system, and I look at somebody's technique. I'll look at their green lights, so where are they good? I'll make them aware of that. Their amber lights, which are the little things that might need tweaking, but actually, if you tweak them, would it make a big difference? Probably not. Is there a red light that is really stopping them from kicking on? And all of us normally have 1 or 2 red lights. Once they're aware of those red lights, I make them aware they have to earn the right to correct the red light before they can move on. So the ownership and the expectation is back on the player. I don't want it to become just a telling culture. So the worst thing is to see somebody like me as, I'll go and see Ryan and he'll fix me. Well, that's fine, but that type of person tends to be a bit of a firefighter golfer. So they're putting out little fires in their game, and they're not really moving on. But if we can nail that one thing with the average club golfer, they will enjoy their game so much more.
Yes, well, what you did in the golf course I went on is that we had morning of coaching where we were just on the practice area, and you gave us various drills. So it was warming up, making sure we're getting the right movements, posture, little tiny hitting motions, and lots of different drills, which was very similar to flute again, in that's I spent my life giving people drills and giving them ideas on how to warm up, so that you don't go. I always say, we've got to be. You can't just be like the 100-meter running. A 100-meter runner doesn't go and just run 100 meters. They warm up. They do stretching exercise. They might jog 400 meters and then run 100. They don't just go and practice running 100 meters. So I love the fact that you gave us drills, which then we took away. This is Rolf and I, my husband and I, and we've practiced them almost like a religion every time we've gone to the golf course. And I tell you what, it works.
Brilliant.
And that was so interesting for me as a student. It was good for me to realise what it was like to be a student again, because I haven't been a student for such a long time. And you sometimes, I think you can forget as a teacher how a student will learn, and everyone is different, and you need to adapt to the student and adapt to their needs, which is what you were doing all through that course, in that I've heard you teach different people, and you don't say the same thing to everyone. You're saying different things applicable to the individual, which I always thought is the sign of a fabulous teacher, rather than just repeat the same old, regardless who's standing in front of you. So it was a real eye-opener for me to remember what it's like to learn, and to take that away and put that into practice, and then see results. And I think that's what all our listeners can do as well, and that you have to really listen, take on board what's being said, go away and work at that, and then look back and see what's happened.
100%.
Yeah. Although I am someone who likes to be perfect, Ryan, so I'm really struggling. I always used to practice. I mean, you were saying about the practice. I practiced 6 hours a day for years and years. You get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, you practice. You might have breakfast, and then you go and practice. Then it was work, and through college days, 6 hours practice.
It's continuous.
Continuous holidays. You practice. Took my flute everywhere. I never relaxed properly on holiday because I had to get my practice done. Then I could relax. So I was very much totally blinkered, focused. My 20s were all about achieving. I was very lucky. I managed to achieve, but it was through the work. I put in all the work, and that is exactly the same as in any other practical, professional discipline.
Yes, I believe what you've just mentioned there, and thanks for the kind words. You were amazing on the trip in Portugal.
Oh, thank you, Ryan.
And it was great to have you and your husband Rolf there, and you could really see. I had two individuals in front of me there who I knew were successful in their own right. Rolf in his business and yourself with your music. And you could see that in your golf game. You could also see it in your equipment, how methodical your clubs were in the right compartments. I designed the sessions in a way that you should stimulate the mind every day to create the same habits, so that when you come back tomorrow, you can almost replicate them. The game of golf is so complex and difficult, and each day you may feel different. You may have an injury, or it's not as warm, or it's colder, and it may be raining. So your golf swing, your technique will change. Flexibility, things like that. But if we can adopt similar principles every day, or the same principles every day, how are you going to construct your training session on that day? So like we did in Portugal, we always started our warm-up, our stretching, then we put the obstacle in front that we had to hit 10 times, 15 times before we would move on to big shots.
Yeah.
So it's all relevant training, where I see a lot of club golfers. We have it this week, is our club championship this weekend, and I guarantee you the driving range and the putting green will be the busiest it's been all year. And people come and they panic practice. You don't see these people all year.
No.
I actually tell these people, you'd be better off going and have a meal, have a couple of drinks, chill out, relax, turn up and play like you do every week. But they're building themselves up and trying to do something different, and now the mind is so stressed. By the time it comes to the weekend, they're really wound up by it. So depending on what personality you are, you should design your training around who you are and what you do.
And what you want to achieve from that. You know, there's... I was contacted by someone recently for one of their students who is about to retire. They're still working at the moment, but they're practicing when they can, sort of for about an hour, but they're doing lots of exercises and technical stuff, and they don't get a chance to play, which is sort of the wrong way around at that level and at that time, in that you want to encourage the enjoyment and do warm-ups and little drills, but you need to get on to the playing, because what you're doing, the hobby is to get to play. Like in golf, our hobby is to get to play.
Correct.
When I first started golf, I had a golf coach who said to me, I'd just come back from, we'd just been away for a weekend, first weekend away to play golf.
Amazing.
And it was so exciting.
Wow.
We were really excited. So I came back and had a lesson with this golf coach, and he said, how have you been? I said, it's just brilliant. I said, I just had a weekend away playing golf. I didn't tell you could go and play on a golf course. I said, what?
Wow.
You shouldn't be on a golf course yet.
Huh.
I said, but that's the whole point of this, isn't it?
Oh my God.
Aren't I having lessons so I can go and play golf? And it was a real downer. I mean, I was so demoralised and felt patronised.
Oh.
And I thought, I'm an adult learner who's just come back and said, I've loved learning because I've managed to go and play. I've had a great time and I want more. And just told me I shouldn't be doing it.
Well, that's the definition of the wrong type of coach and the wrong type of coaching.
Yeah.
He's taking the wind out of your sails.
Absolutely.
He should be motoring you along, encouraging you to get back out there. I would encourage anybody, if any listeners are here who don't play golf and do want to play golf, go on the golf course as early as you can. Get in the real environment, and then you'll understand what skills you'll need to cope with that environment. Because in our game, you practice or you train on a driving range where you get a big basket of balls. You're on a nice square mat, which the surface is always the same, and you're just hitting balls into a field. But when you go on a golf course, every shot is different. It's a different length shot. You're aiming in different directions, maybe uphill, downhill, side slopes, into the wind, downwind. One's a bunker shot, then you got a putt. Very, very different. You can't do all that on a driving range. So I would encourage anybody to get in the real environment, and don't just play golf on the golf course, train. Bit like tennis, they have a second serve. In golf, you don't get that luxury. However, in your training, do it.
Yeah. And it's interesting what you're saying, because the equivalent of our driving range is practicing the technical stuff in your room, and then your equivalent of getting out on the golf course is our getting out and playing on in a concert or playing to somebody. Might be a lesson or a concert, whatever it might be. And you need both. You need a good mixture of both to learn how you cope, because you might practice your tone, your technique, your articulation for hours, but then you go and play a piece, and it's a bit like you're saying the golf course is full of variables. A piece is full of variables. It might be slow, it might be fast, it might be high, it might be low, might have lots of tonguing, no tonguing, might have big long phrases where it's really difficult for breathing. You different types of music, so you have to know how to phrase it. So, if it's early music, you do it one way. If it's contemporary music, you do it another way. So all the variables. So again, we've got so many similarities.
How do you plan? Say you have a performance coming up on Saturday. It's Monday. You got 5 days. If you're playing at a high level, or you're the average person playing music who just loves to play it for their family, how would you get somebody to prepare during those 5 days in regards to playing the piece or doing their drills?
Okay, well, unfortunately, the 5 days before is about 3 months too late.
Yeah.
It depends whether you're going to do a whole recital, a whole concert, or just an odd piece. So you have to really plan way back. You have to, if someone was asking me to do a concert in 18 months' time, my head's already buzzing with whatever it is.
Of course.
And I start with thinking through and working, what do I need to that? And then you build up your practice so that you are physically capable of doing that concert. There was a brass player at my college, and we got to the final exams. And so the final recital program was 40 minutes long. And this is after 4 years of study. And after 20 minutes, he stopped. And he said, "I'm awfully sorry, that's all I can do." He'd never played for more than 20 minutes. So he couldn't do that. So that's a lesson learnt.
Absolutely.
That you need to prepare to cope with whatever the demands will be for whatever it is you're working towards. So for golf, it's not just walking around about 4 to 6 miles, depending on how wayward you are. But it's the physical thing of carrying or pulling your clubs and the swing and using controlling all the muscles. And like with music, balance, rhythm and timing is so crucial. And then practice beforehand, of course.
Okay.
So so if you've trained well in your 5 days before, really, in a way, you don't need to play the piece, because if you keep playing the piece, you get bored of it, and the creative juices will start to go. So, if you were playing your golf course and you went and played every day for 5 days the same golf course doing the same thing, if something changes on the day of the actual event, you're not going to be able to cope with it.
Absolutely.
So basically, I'd say keep your skills going, keep the process going of the practice, that you're practicing the skills that are needed to play the piece.
I love that.
But not just play the piece, otherwise
I love that.
it won't happen.
Very similar, once again, very, very similar, because we're encouraging the players to train so that they're virtually at their peak most weeks. So if they have a problem, they must nail that in the off season, not 5 days before a tournament.
Yeah.
And it's exactly the same. So a player will say to me, "What should I be doing this week? My tournament starts Saturday. What should I be doing?" My answer is doing your daily habits. So each player will have a set of criteria, a standardised thing that becomes habitual, and just keep doing it. What you don't want to do is cram, play the golf course loads. No, actually you want to taper off, so you're fresh and you're ready, you're excited, ready to go. Yeah,
I used to say, if someone asks you to play in a year or 18 months' time, if you remember the excitement when someone says, "Would you like to go and play?"
Oh,
yes.
amazing.
And then as it gets closer, that excitement sort of can dwindle for various reasons. It could be nerves, it could be fear, it could be because you haven't prepared well enough. So you need to make sure you've got a plan of action that keeps that excitement alive.
Yeah.
And I agree, the week before is not the week to be trying to sort problems out, because that's basically, it's too late. If you've got a really healthy practice routine, then you keep that routine going so that all the skills are at a really good level.
Yes.
And then the performance fits.
Correct. One thing I'll encourage the average club golfer to do is do stuff at home, do stuff in their garden, habitual once again. Don't, because it's the club championship this week, don't go and cram it all in and drive yourself mad mentally, but stay flexible, stay fluid, create your tempo and rhythm.
Really good birds. Well, Brian, all I can say is that as one of your students, I practice.
I know you do,
I practice a lot.
You are extremely diligent.
Yes.
Gold star.
I don't always get the results that I want, so I'm having to manage that, which is exactly the same as flute. I won't blame the coach, but it's been a really interesting dynamic to have my role swapped around.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So listen, it's been fantastic to have you here chatting to us. I think it's got really useful advice. Our listeners will see it's applicable. Doesn't matter what your discipline is. We're learning a practical skill, and we learn in a similar way in terms of how we need to approach it.
And you can tell that the parallels are the same, or very similar at least. The habits you create, you've got to train in the environment you're going to play, and you've got to have a rhythm and a flow to your technical ability.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Ryan. Thanks so much for giving up your valuable time. It's been absolutely fascinating. I think we could probably do another one or two about various aspects. So many thanks. If any listeners have got any questions, do send them in. Our email address is talkingflutes@gmail.com, or you can leave a message on our designated Facebook page, Talking Flutes, or Instagram and Twitter @Flute and @Clare Flute. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you for having me, Claire. I feel absolutely honoured to be doing this with you. I really appreciate being asked. Thank you very much.
You're very, very welcome, and we'll see you again. Thanks,
I'd
Ryan.
love to come back.
Bye-bye.
Talking Flutes and Talking Flutes Extra are podcast productions by the Trevor James Flute Company. For more information, visit trevorjamesflutes.com.